Valle del Cauca, Colombia. A land of sugarcane and silence. The rivers cut through green fields, but under the surface, poverty, corruption, and war. Diego León Montoya Sánchez was born there in 1958, into a family that carried neither power nor privilege. His childhood was not marked by dreams, but by survival. The Colombian countryside was already bleeding, caught between guerrillas, paramilitaries, and traffickers. Young Diego learned quickly. In Valle del Cauca, the law was not written in books. It was written in guns, in whispers, in the names of men who ruled from the shadows. Every village had its patron, every street its silent code. He watched his neighbors bend to local bosses. He saw that fear could move people faster than hope, and he decided, better to be the one feared than the one forgotten. While others left the fields for factories, Diego began moving contraband. Small at first, gasoline, weapons, whatever paid. But each deal taught him something. Loyalty could be bought, silence could be enforced, and money, real money, came not from work, but from crime. By the time he reached his 20s, Montoya was no longer just another peasant's son. He was a man who understood the logic of his homeland. That power wasn't granted by government papers, but carved out with bullets. Valle del Cauca had birthed him. Now he was ready to make it bleed for him. The 1990s. Colombia was shifting. The Medellin cartel had collapsed. Its king, Pablo Escobar, gunned down on a rooftop. The Cali cartel, rich, polished, political, was losing ground. In that vacuum, a new power emerged. The Norte del Valle Cartel. Not polished, not flashy, brutal, efficient, built on blood. Diego León Montoya Sánchez, Don Diego, was at the center of it. He understood the market, he understood fear, and he understood that cocaine was no longer just Colombia's business. It was global. From the lush valleys of Cauca, shipments moved north. Tons of white powder flowed through Mexico, into the United States, into Europe. Each brick stamped with the seal of a cartel that was quickly becoming a multinational empire. But Montoya's genius was not just in moving cocaine. It was in organization. While rivals bragged, he built networks. Farmers, transporters, killers, politicians. Everyone had a price, and Don Diego paid it. Everyone had a role, and Don Diego enforced it. Ruthless discipline kept his cartel alive. Betrayal was met with execution. Disobedience with disappearance. The Norte del Valle was not just a cartel. It was a machine. And by the late 1990s, that machine was unstoppable. For every boss that fell, another rose. For every enemy silenced, territory expanded. Diego Montoya had risen from nothing. Now, he sat atop Colombia's deadliest cartel, one that even the DEA called the most dangerous criminal organization in the world. Power never comes without enemies. Inside the Norte del Valle cartel, loyalty was fragile, built on fear and greed. And fear has limits. By the late 1990s, fractures appeared. Montoya's partners were no longer satisfied with shared profits. They wanted the throne. The cartel split into factions, some loyal to Don Diego, others drawn to his rival, Wilber Varela, known as Jabon. What followed was not business, it was war. Assassinations in broad daylight. Policemen gunned down in their patrol cars. Lawyers, judges, even journalists caught in the crossfire. Entire cities turned into battlefields for control of a single route, a single shipment, a single kilo of white powder. Montoya responded with merciless efficiency. His sicarios didn't just kill, they erased bloodlines. Fathers, sons, brothers, all gone in one night. The message was clear. Betrayal was not a risk. It was a death sentence. But betrayal breeds more betrayal. Inside the cartel, whispers grew louder. Informants sold secrets. Allies turned into enemies. And every bullet fired in Valle del Cauca echoed all the way to Washington. The DEA began to watch closer. The Colombian government could no longer ignore the massacres. And Don Diego, once invisible, was becoming infamous. Blood had built his empire. But now, blood was tearing it apart. When the Cali cartel fell, its empire didn't vanish overnight. Fragments remained. Lieutenants, smugglers, corrupt officials still loyal to the old order. They were weakened, but not broken. For Diego Montoya, This was both an opportunity and a threat. The Cali remnants controlled lucrative routes, pipelines of cocaine already established across oceans. If he seized them, Norte del Valle would dominate Colombia completely. If he failed, his cartel would collapse under the weight of endless wars. Montoya chose war. His sicarios hunted Cali's survivors, striking in clubs, on highways, in their own homes. Every killing carried a message. The future belonged to Norte del Valle, but the remnants did not surrender easily. They forged alliances with rivals, armed their men, and launched counterattacks. Cities like Cali and Buenaventura became killing grounds. Night after night, bodies appeared in rivers, alleys, even churchyards. Montoya's brutality escalated. Entire police units were bribed or executed. Judges were silenced. Politicians fell in line. The war was no longer just criminal, it was political. By the early 2000s, the Norte del Valle Cartel had absorbed most of Cali's networks, but the cost was staggering. Thousands dead, communities shattered, and Colombia's reputation stained even further. Montoya had won, but each victory left him with more enemies than allies. Diego León Montoya Sánchez understood one rule above all: power flows through fear. In the Norte del Valle, violence was a tool, a ledger, a language everyone could read. Rivals who disobeyed disappeared. Policemen who probed too deeply vanished. Families were punished as loudly as the men themselves. Every killing, every mutilation, every corpse left in the streets carried a single message: Don Diego was watching. But Montoya's brutality was calculated. Not chaos, but control. Fear was currency. It bought loyalty. It bought silence. It bought obedience. Even within his cartel, betrayal was paid in full. A lieutenant could be a trusted ally in the morning, a corpse by nightfall. Discipline was lethal. Yet violence alone could not sustain an empire. Montoya blended terror with incentives. Farmers, transporters, politicians, they were paid, protected, and warned. Obedience was cheaper than death, but death was always an option. The message was clear. Survival depended on alignment with the cartel's will. In Valle del Cauca, the streets whispered his name. In Miami, the DEA marked him as the most dangerous criminal alive. To outsiders, he was a butcher. To insiders, a necessary evil. To the world, a nightmare expanding daily. Blood was balance. Fear was currency. And Don Diego never defaulted. Diego Montoya didn't just build a cartel, he built a state within a state. In Valle del Cauca and beyond, the Norte del Valle was more than drugs. It was governance, law, and order, under his terms. Roads were paved, bridges repaired, markets protected. Farmers who supplied coca were shielded from police. Small towns operated under cartel decrees. Taxes were collected, not for Bogota, but for Montoya. He became judge, jury, and executioner. Obedience was rewarded. Defiance was erased. Politicians, mayors, and law enforcement officers were either allies or victims. Contracts were bought. Secrets were sold. Corruption flowed like the rivers, unseen but unstoppable. Even international authorities found it hard to penetrate this shadow government. Montoya controlled the flow of cocaine, the movement of men, the loyalty of armies. Information traveled faster than bullets. Orders were enforced before enemies could react. He was everywhere and nowhere at once, invisible yet omnipotent. And this was his greatest weapon: perception. The world saw violence. He saw infrastructure. Every act of brutality reinforced his governance. Every bribe secured obedience. In Colombia, a whisper of Montoya's name meant compliance. In the Norte del Valle, he wasn't just a kingpin. He was a government. By the early 2000s, Diego León Montoya Sánchez had become more than a Colombian problem. He was an international ghost, a name whispered in DEA offices, in Miami boardrooms, and in Bogota's corridors of power. The Norte del Valle cartel had grown unstoppable, its shipments flowing north with precision. Tons of cocaine crossed rivers, mountains, and borders. And at the center, Montoya remained untouchable, invisible, calculating, deadly. The DEA placed him on its most wanted list. $1 million reward. Global alerts. Task forces assembled. But Montoya thrived in chaos. He changed locations like shadows move at night. Safe houses, hidden ranches, remote airstrips. No pattern, no trace. He understood intelligence. He understood fear. Even within the cartel, everyone knew one slip could mean death. Communications were coded. Meetings were fleeting. Traitors were executed. And for the US authorities, every capture attempt seemed to fail. Montoya wasn't just evading arrest. He was sending a message. You can pursue me, but the system cannot contain me. His empire was a mirror of his mind, organized, ruthless, and untouchable. To the world, he was the most dangerous Colombian alive. To his enemies, he was inevitable. And to the DEA, Montoya became a shadow they could never fully grasp. No empire built on blood survives betrayal forever. By the mid-2000s, cracks began to appear within the Norte del Valle Cartel. Montoya's lieutenants, once loyal, grew ambitious. Whispers of deals with rivals, secret shipments, and double crosses reached his ears. Trust became a liability. Every handshake carried suspicion. Every conversation could be recorded. Every ally could be a traitor. Montoya's response was methodical, brutal, precise. A missing body. A family disappeared. A warning carved into the walls of safe houses. But betrayal has a momentum all its own. Even his inner circle, the men who had risen with him from nothing, began to fracture under pressure. Some sought power. Some sought survival. Some sought revenge. Montoya had trained his men to obey. But loyalty cannot be forced indefinitely, especially when billions are at stake. The DEA exploited these divisions, turning whispers into leads. Rivals learned quickly. Montoya's wrath was deadly, but paranoia made him vulnerable. Alliances shifted overnight. Cities once controlled by the cartel became contested zones. Violence escalated, even as Montoya tried to maintain order. In the world of the Norte del Valle, betrayal was both the poison and the cure. Montoya knew it. And he struck first, always, knowing that a ruler who hesitates is already dead. By 2007, the walls were closing in. León Montoya Sánchez, once untouchable, faced enemies on every side, rivals, traitors, and law enforcement alike. The Norte del Valle Cartel had fractured. Blood had bought loyalty, but it could not buy invincibility. Colombian authorities, backed by the DEA, moved decisively. Raids struck safe houses, informants led them to hidden ranches, communications were intercepted. The empire of fear that Montoya had built for decades began to crumble. Montoya himself remained a ghost, slipping through raids, changing locations daily, protected by loyalists who still feared him more than death. But even a ghost leaves traces. A tip here, a mistake there. And in Medellin, in the mountains, he was finally cornered. The arrest was surgical. No firefight, no spectacle. Montoya was captured alive, his empire unraveling behind him. The Norte del Valle Cartel did not die with him, but it lost its king. Allies scattered. Rivals surged. The cocaine corridors he controlled were contested, chaotic and bloody. Diego Montoya, the man who had ruled with bullets, bribes, and fear, was no longer free. His fall marked the end of an era in Colombian trafficking. But the legend of Don Diego, the butcher, the strategist, the shadow ruler, would echo in the valleys and cities he had dominated for decades. After his arrest in 2007, Diego León Montoya Sánchez faced a new reality. No longer the untouchable king of Valle del Cauca, no longer the ghost-haunting DEA offices. Now, he was a prisoner. His fate decided not in Colombia, but across the border in the United States. Extradition was inevitable. Months of negotiations, court hearings, and international pressure culminated in a transfer. Montoya was flown under tight security, surrounded by agents, into a country that had tracked his every move for years. The empire he built could not follow him. The men who feared him could not shield him. In the US, he faced a legal system far colder than the streets of Colombia. No bribery could sway judges. No threats could silence prosecutors. Montoya, once the architect of terror, now became a defendant. Every shipment, every killing, every act of betrayal was scrutinized in detail. Yet even in this concrete cage, Montoya remained calculated. He observed, he listened, he waited. The man who ruled a cartel with bullets and whispers now understood a different kind of power, one wielded through law, not blood. The extradition marked the end of his freedom. But the legend of Don Diego, the butcher, the strategist, the shadow ruler, continued to haunt both Colombia and the corridors of American justice. Diego León Montoya Sánchez is no longer free, but his shadow remains. The Norte del Valle Cartel, though fractured, still operates. Roots endure. Networks survive. Violence continues where his empire once ruled. In Valle del Cauca, people still whisper his name, not with admiration, but with fear. Farmers remember the days when defiance meant disappearance. Cities remember the nights when bodies appeared on highways, a warning to all. Montoya's methods became a blueprint. Other cartels studied his rise, his discipline, his combination of terror and governance. Fear was no longer just a tool, it became a strategy. Every killing, every bribe, every silent ally reinforced a system of control that outlived its master. In US courts, his billions in cocaine profits are tallied, his crimes enumerated. But in Colombia, the fear he planted grew roots deeper than any prison wall. Rival factions fight, but none can entirely erase his imprint. The Norte del Valle is smaller, but the lessons remain. Obey, pay, survive, or vanish. Diego Montoya fell. His freedom ended. But his legacy? It still walks the streets of Colombia, unseen, unstoppable, unforgotten. Empires crumble, men die, but fear never forgets.